Good afternoon, and thank you for joining Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan's virtual town hall. My name is Mike Anderson, and I'll be today's moderator. In just a few moments, I'll kick it over to the senators for some very brief opening remarks to kick it off. But before I do, I'd like to take a few moments to let everyone know that if you'd like to ask a question during this town hall, please press *3 at any time, and you'll be connected with an operator. Again, if you'd like the opportunity to ask a question this afternoon, please press *3 to enter the queue. With that, I'll turn the call over to Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to all the Alaskans on the line this evening or late this afternoon, your time. Senator Sullivan and I have been holding these weekly town halls for a month now, and I think we have found them very valuable in connecting with folks and hearing their concerns and issues and trying to be responsive, providing answers to your questions as to how we can access resources and deal with the impacts of this pandemic. I think it's fair to say that there are still many unanswered questions. The situation is continuing to evolve, as you know, back in the state and really around the country. So we continue to feel different concerns, different situations every week. We have been taking this really in phases of federal response with early money towards research and funding towards testing and vaccine, and then the direct assistance, and now more recently with the CARES Act, providing stabilization help for states, local governments, healthcare providers, and then again, direct support to individuals, students, schools, small business owners, and their employees and nonprofits. So you've heard a lot about the CARES Act. You've probably also heard that the two most utilized programs that we're hearing about are the Paycheck Protection program through the Small Business Administration. We have heard the need clearly. Alaska has about 99% of our businesses are defined as small businesses, and so when you are impacted this directly, because effectively the tourism industry is closed off or through order of the government, you've been shut down. Volumes have decreased. You haven't been able to keep your employees on. We've been trying to address many aspects of this with regards to these small business programs. We heard very, very clearly the concerns from our seasonal workers, our seasonal businesses with regards to the PPP, the Paycheck Protection, as it was initially outlined. Worked very, very hard to make changes to address the seasonal aspect of so many of our businesses. So it was earlier this week on Monday that the Treasury Department announced this rule change that enables the seasonal businesses to choose a different 12-week expense period when you're applying for your PPP, so that it more accurately reflects the operating payroll and thus the amount of your loan. That was something we heard from you, but we knew going in that this was something that we needed to address. But the delegation worked very hard to make that change and ensure that our seasonal employers are going to be able to have some assist to help their businesses and to keep their employees on the payroll. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL, I wish that we could say we are having better success with. At the time that the program ran out of money, 10 days or so ago, only 8 loans had been processed to the state of Alaska. There were 2,700 advance grants, and that's good, but the EIDL for us is not working the way that we would like, and we hear your concerns about that. Right now, that portal isn't even open to receive new applications, and both Senator Sullivan and I have been speaking with the Secretary of Treasury about the defects in this program. Many have asked about unemployment insurance. Last week at our town hall, we had the director of the Unemployment Compensation Division in Alaska and the Commissioner of Labor on the program as well, updating us on the expanded unemployment benefits that have gone out. I think it is important to note that the expanded program for the self-employed, independent contractors, and gig workers was activated on Friday. We're told that those payments to that expanded group should be going out within about a week. So I know people have been waiting on that, and to the state's credit, they got that up and running earlier than they thought they might. And then there's the direct assistance that has been going out to individuals around the state. Nationwide, we understand that it's been over $88 million in directed assistance payments that have gone out from Treasury. So that is continuing to be pushed out the door. But if you have specific questions about that, we can speak to that this evening too. So in the Senate, we're going to be back. We're going to be back in session on Monday. We will convene and have opportunities to debate what comes next. And so the opportunity to hear from you folks tonight to understand your specific situation, the concerns, and how we can continue to address the impacts to you and your families and businesses is what we're here to do. So looking forward to your questions tonight. Now I'll turn it over to Dan.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and I want to thank all the Alaskans who are on the line. I'm actually calling from my home in Anchorage. I got home last weekend after the CARES Act 2.0 was signed into law, and I'm in quarantine here with my wife and daughters. And like so many of you, we're all facing these unprecedented challenges. I want to thank so many of our leaders throughout the state. Everybody has been playing a role, not easy. Everybody's been sacrificing through these challenging times. One of the things that we are focused on is continuing to try to get federal resources to as many Alaskans as possible as people in our state are struggling to deal with these very, very serious challenges. And we're doing that through several different streams. And we want to continue to hear from all of you with regard to how you're seeing the implementation, some of the specific challenges that you're seeing, and then, of course, individual casework that you or your families or your small businesses might need. Our staffs are working closely together, and I always say we can't promise it will fix the problem, but we certainly can commit to putting all the time and effort we can into helping your individual issues that our teams are doing working around the clock to try and help their fellow Alaskans. You know, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, of course, legislation this size for the whole country is going to hit snafus, bureaucratic roadblocks. Again, hearing from all of you on that can help us focus our efforts with the federal government on where we need to do our job to help all of you. Just a couple areas in particular where we've been very focused. You know, as we've talked about on the individual side, families, individuals, the economic impact payments from the IRS have been dispersed or being dispersed. And again, I think a majority of Alaskans have received these, but there's many who haven't. It's still frustrating. Whether you didn't have direct deposit for your tax filing or other areas with regard to how this is implemented, we certainly want to help you with that. There is actually if you Google IRS Get My Payment, that can help you with regard to providing the extra information to the IRS if you haven't received one of those checks. As Senator Murkowski mentioned, we replenished the Paycheck Protection program and importantly worked with the Treasury Department to get a fix that the delegation really drove to enable seasonal businesses, which are so many of our small businesses, to be able to apply for a loan based on how many employees they had last summer, not now. The PPP loan amount is a function of how big your payroll base is, and having the ability to use last summer's a 12-week period from last summer in terms of your employees will enable our small businesses to get much bigger PPP loans, which we think will be important. With regard to fisheries, as we talked about earlier, several elements of the CARES Act, the unemployment insurance, the PPP regulations are focused on trying to help our fisheries, whether commercial or sport or charter. And there's also a fund that was in the original CARES Act of $300 million for direct assistance to those impacted. We expect the federal government, NOAA, and NIMS to come out with those formulas on how that $300 million is going to be divided up. We believe, as we've been working with these federal agencies on the formulas, that we should see a significant portion of that money coming to our state, given that we are the superpower of seafood, with over 60% of all seafood harvested in America comes from Alaska. But we are monitoring that closely, and we'll get the word out as soon as the feds do on how to apply for that relief that we know so many in our coastal communities and fishing communities need relief on. The energy sector, of course, has also been hammered by this pandemic, and we want to. Well, first of all, I just want to say to all the families and workers in that sector of the economy who are experiencing difficult times, we have been trying to work through many of the challenges on that front. I think some of you have seen the work we have been doing pressuring Saudi Arabia, which decided to undertake dramatic production increases, which dropped the price of energy globally in a way that significantly impacted our state in a very negative way. We've been having very frank discussions with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on their actions, and that could lead, from my perspective, to a pullout of our military forces from those countries, from that country in particular, if they're not working in a way that's much more constructive. And we're also starting to look at some of the big banks in America who openly discriminate against investment in Alaska, which is going to hurt us long term. So these are some of the issues that we're working on and trying to address. The final one on the energy side, the Federal Reserve just amended its what they call their Main Street lending program. This is for businesses above the small business loan PPP coverage that, again, could apply to bigger companies in Alaska that need assistance during these challenging times in the energy sector and other parts of our economy. So those are some of the key issues. Again, we want to hear from you, as I'll be heading back to D.C. in a couple days, and the Senate will be in session, and we need to hear from all of you, ready to try to address some of the particular challenges that you're seeing on the ground, and how we can get through this pandemic stronger, more resilient. But I, again, want to thank everybody for the incredible sacrifice and hard work. Our state's economy is finally starting to open up, which I think is a hopeful sign, and hopefully that starts to happen throughout the country as well.
Thank you, Senators. Once again, for listeners looking to ask a question today, please press *3 to be placed in the queue. Again, that's *3 to be placed into the queue. With that, we're going to go to the phones, and first up is Michelle Walker, who has a question for the Senators. Go ahead.
I want to say thank you for all the hard work you've done. And to be honest with you, listening to Senator Murkowski and Sullivan, you've answered a lot of my questions and said a lot of things, but I feel it's really important. I've listened in on all the town meetings and never been in the queue. I guess, a lot of people wanted to say things. My situation is pretty dire. I'm 69 years old. I have stage 4 kidney disease. I have diabetes. I have high blood pressure. Now, saying that, all of that is under control really well, and I have a really good independent business. But I see clients in my home. Well, as soon as the COVID came out, I am in the high risk place. I can no longer see clients. I haven't seen clients. I quit seeing my clients at the beginning of March. So I have not worked for almost 2 months, and that's my job. And I don't qualify for Paycheck Protection, the EIDL loans. I put in for the unemployment when the state said independent contractors could do that, and they have taken my form, and I've sent in the thing for the past 2 weeks, but I've heard nothing from them on that quarter. I haven't received a stimulus check, although I do have automatic deposit with my Social Security, and every day I read in the news about another $1 million company getting millions of dollars to bail them out of their problems. I've lived in Alaska for 50 years, and I support local. I don't buy from Amazon or do any of that. I support the local merchants. And I love Fairbanks and I love Alaska, but let me tell you, I am in a world of hurt. So what would you suggest for me?
Well, Michelle, I'll just start off by just acknowledging the frustration that is clearly evident as you're outlining your situation there. You say you've got an independent business. You were probably doing just fine before the coronavirus hit, and now you don't have a source of income, and you're limited in your ability to bring that income back in if you have your own health complications and thus are vulnerable to this virus. So the first thing is clearly the unemployment insurance. I'm glad to hear you say that you have applied. As I mentioned, you are in this category. They call it the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. This is this expanded UI for the self-employed, the independent contractors. So this was just activated last Friday, so not even a week ago, and they are now working to get these payments out. So if you have been accepted into this system, as I understand, you should be getting your first unemployment check within about a week. Again, this is sooner than they thought they would have the system up, but it will be in place. I believe also, and I'm hoping that I'm giving it accurate here, but I believe that when we had the unemployment director on last week, she indicated that you will receive your unemployment insurance that goes back from the date of your eligibility for it. So it would not just be like the first week. So that will be a help. I guess you say you're not eligible for the PPP, and I'm not sure why you would not be. Obviously, PPP is one of the prime considerations is the design to be able to keep your employees with you on the payroll. You may not have any, and so maybe the PPP is not the best program, although it would still allow a limited amount for a loan for the cost of just the monthly operation of your business, your utilities, your mortgage, the like. EIDL, I wish that I could be more assertive in recommending that as an option, but in fairness, it has been so difficult to see results for Alaskans with this plan. In my conversation with the Secretary of Treasury today about just this issue, I said, I don't want to direct people there if the program is not going to be functioning in a way that's going to be helpful to them. And his assurance was they are having issues with the rollout. They don't want it to be as bad as the startup of the replenished PPP fund this week. And so they're taking this one a little bit slower. He heard the concern, but in fairness, we haven't seen the results in Alaska that we want out of that. I also want to share with you and with others, we talk a lot about the relief through the CARES Act. I think it is important to know that on the state side, through the state stabilization funds, this is the $1.25 billion that is directed to the state. So the governor and the legislature are working now to determine those allocations. But the state also is emphasizing the impact to our small businesses, and the governor's proposal was $300 million to Alaska small businesses that the SBA loans are not covering. So that may be even a better option and alternative for you.
So, Michelle, I just want to mention that. Again, I'm very sorry that you're going through these challenging times. You're right to be careful, though. You did describe yourself as somebody who, when you look at the data, is particularly vulnerable to this virus. So I think being cautious the way you have been is very smart. And again, you should feel free to be reaching out to our teams on these kind of issues. But a couple things. We have gotten word, and again, this is what I talked about at the top, these bureaucratic snafus. If you're a Social Security recipient, you would think that it would be pretty darn easy for the feds to get you your economic recovery check. That hasn't been the case. We have been hearing, even though a lot of these checks have gone out, that Social Security recipients are taking longer. We're tracking that, but those should be coming out soon. And if you're a Social Security recipient, there's nothing you are supposed to even have to do with that. One thing you can do is, on the website irs.gov, there is a check your payment status tool that you can use to see your status. I believe you enter your proper information. As Senator Murkowski also mentioned, unemployment insurance, you clearly are covered by the broader CARES Act unemployment. And even if you wanted to, and I'm not sure, there's opportunities there, it wouldn't be a huge loan, but the PPP program does cover independent contractors and people in your situation. So that's something else that, in my view, unless there's something, out there that, just in my view, I think that you should be qualified for that. So we're here in early May on the Social Security recipients who are waiting on their economic recovery check, their personal check. And on these other issues, again, if you don't hear or you have problems, you can always reach out to our offices for additional assistance.
Yeah, before we go to the next one, Mike, I just want to add on to that, because in addition to what Senator Sullivan has just said, that Social Security filers should be seeing something in their accounts by early May, no later than May 5th is what we are told. We're also told that veterans benefit recipients should also begin receiving their stimulus payments by early May. So I know we might have some of our veterans who had a similar question in terms of when they might expect it. So we're told it should be by this first week in May.
All right, thank you, Senators. Next up, we're going to go to Bill Sosnowski in Anchorage. He's got a question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, I can hear you, Bill.
I heard briefly on one of the other shows where people asked a question about driving in and out of Alaska, and you said you were working on it, and I was wondering if you could give me a follow-up on that. And I read the Anchorage Daily News regularly, and I haven't seen that subject mentioned or addressed at all in all the discussion about COVID-19.
Yeah, so the U.S.-Canadian border is partially, it's subject to a partial closure due to COVID. And what that means is that non-essential travel is being limited. That partial closure was through the 21st of April. By mutual agreement, it was extended an additional 30 days, so this will take it into mid-May. What they define by essential travel is making sure that food and fuel and supplies necessary, that trucking of all of that will be allowed. What they're trying to discourage is leisure travel, and I guess recreation. I don't know what the difference between leisure and recreation, but what we have been doing is kind of monitoring the situation. People will call our offices and say, I've been living down in Arizona all winter long. This is the time of year that I come back every year. Can I drive home? And we have worked with those people that have called and are told that their travel is not interrupted, that they can continue that. And so it is something that, again, I don't think they're encouraging travel that is just kind of deciding that you want to go and sightsee through Canada right now and ultimately end up in Alaska. That is being discouraged and not allowed, but there is no limitation on the essential travel that would allow for the flow of commerce and also to facilitate workers who may go back and forth across the border on a very frequent basis. So you're right, I haven't seen that much in the newspapers, which must mean that that folks are able to do what they need to do without making the front page of the newspaper.
So, Bill, just to add on to what Senator Murkowski mentioned, you know, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada on April 20th reached an agreement to restrict non-essential travel for 30 additional days. And Canada, like Alaska, has a mandatory 14-day quarantine for all people entering their country. So it doesn't appear they're strictly enforcing that for Alaskans trying to return home. And right now we have not seen the U.S. denying entry. If if they make it to the Alaska border in less than 14 days. As you know, it doesn't normally take nearly that long. So this is kind of the thing that we've been hearing. They are allowing trailers and RVs through to return to Alaska. You have to show your, documents that indicate you're going home. But here's kind of the catch on that. They're generally requiring that the travelers be entirely self-contained, meaning that they have their food, their water supplies on hand already, that they can stop only at, gas stations, no grocery stores, no hotels, no drive-thrus, supposedly no interacting with any Canadians, and there are fines and jail time that you could bump up against if you don't abide by that. So that means that people are driving through in an RV or a trailer. You obviously have it a little easier if you have all these self-contained things and can sleep. If you're just in a car, you need to be prepared to just keep driving and, have the appropriate gear, sleep in your car, as well as have all the food and water supplies. Our offices can help on a case-by-case basis. We were literally on the phone today with DHS and a constituent trying to help this individual get through a crossing between Canada and the United States. So we are ready to help in this regard, but that's the latest information we have.
All right, thank you, Senators. Next up, we're going to go to Caitlin Jarrett in Skagway, who's got a question.
Senators, sorry, I didn't get asked this question earlier. I promised a business owner in Skagway I would, and then I didn't, so I'm following through. My question would be, or comment would be, I know a lot of Alaskans haven't been successful with the EIDL. He happens to be a large business owner in Skagway, and he can't get a consistent answer on what the cap amount for the EIDL is. We're all told it's $2 million, but when he talks to people at the SBA and large business owners who have received the grant, they've been capped at $500,000, and he's really hoping to access the $2 million, and wondering if you guys can comment on that or check it out when you go back to the Capitol.
So what I know with EIDL, we appropriated $20 billion in total for the loans in these last two funding bills, which offers up to $2 million in assistance. These can be used to pay your fixed debt, your payroll, accounts payable, anything that can't be paid because of the disaster's impact. Interest rate is 3.75 for small businesses. For nonprofits, it's 2.75. So I think that should answer the question in terms of what the cap is. The cap would be $2 million under those terms. Again, as I mentioned in my initial comments, what we understand the status of the EIDL program is right now, that has not been reopened since the funding was used up in the first round, and what I understand occurred, there was such demand, there were so many applications that were received before they ran out of money that they have in their systems now all of these applications that were previously received that did not that were not processed because funds were not granted because they had run out of money. So they've got that pipeline that they need to address first before they open up the portal again for new applications. And so now that they have this new infusion, this additional fusion of money, they will take those loans that were already not finalized, finalize them, and then determine if there are sufficient funds to even reopen it again. My hope is that they will. This is really telling, though, that that less than really 3 weeks, if you will, of these programs being available for access by the public, that they have depleted. In the first round, $349 billion for PPP. Second round was $310. We're moving through that in an extraordinary rate. And then again, the funding that was directed for EIDL literally gone in a period of days. So the demand is clearly there. I think this is going to be one area of the CARES Act that we're going to have to keep coming back to. We were reminded on a previous call that it may be that the worst of the economic hit is not this summer, but the fact that so many of our seasonal businesses, this is the time that they make their money, but will they be able to have a business to come back to next season at this time? And so the ways that we can be there to help our small businesses, this is a focus that we have to continue to address.
And Caitlin, thanks, and it was good to talk to you and several folks in Skagway today. The only thing I would add to that was I think there was some, part of the confusion is the cap statutorily is supposed to be $2 million. But what happened when the CARES Act was originally passed, because the funds were being accessed by so many people, in round one, they started to put caps at like $30,000 or $40,000. And so that was obviously a much less significant amount of funding, although we were able to get a lot of those advance really grants out to, I think it was about 1,500 Alaskans in the first round on the EIDL. So they haven't indicated on this next round, as Senator Murkowski mentioned, the portal is not open yet. They haven't mentioned if the cap is going to go back up again with this being significantly funded again. As soon as we know, we will get that out to everybody. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, Senators. Next up, we're going to go to Debbie Rinke, who's got a question for the Senators.
Oh, we lost her.
Maybe not.
All right, I guess we're going to move it along. We'll go to Dwayne and Sitka, who's got a question for the Senators. Dwayne, go ahead.
Hey, first of all, I'd like to thank both of you for doing your hard work on the PPP thing. I'm a seasonal business and getting that changed. So I've got a kind of a two-part question. We got funded on our PPP loan on Friday, and I guess whatever you want to call it, the legislation came out for the seasonal thing, so we weren't able to get in on that. Extremely happy that we got that. So question one was, will we be able to get, because it is a fairly substantial difference between the average of our employees for 12 months versus a 4-month period, which is, the main time that we're open. And then also on that, if you've received a PPP loan, are you ineligible for the disaster loan? And so that's my question.
So Dwayne, I think take a crack at the first part or both parts of your question, and what we wanted to do was make sure SBA, and they put out guidance yesterday that you can modify the loan that you got on Friday, and we were kind of giving that advice to folks, but we didn't have the definitive statement from SBA that yes, you could, meaning had you got just exactly your situation, you got the loan prior to the guidance, and now that the guidance is out there, that's going to enable you to get a much bigger loan. That was the whole point of us pressing Treasury to do that. We hope that many other seasonal small businesses are going to take advantage of that. So you can modify the existing PPP loan through the E-Trans system. Some Alaskans are already starting to do that. We're still working with the SBA and Treasury and lenders to get specific clarification. Some lenders are already doing this in Alaska, just doing the modification. Others are waiting for a little bit more guidance. My recommendation to you is to go back to your lender and tell them you want to do this. Remind them that these loans are all federally backed, so our financial institutions, which are doing a great job in Alaska on getting these loans out, but with the federal government backing the loan, there's no risk to them. And then finally, you can do both the EIDL and PPP, but there's a little bit of an issue. You can't use them for the same purpose. But again, there's ways in which you can use one for one element of your business and another for another element of your business. So it just can't be direct overlap.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think Dan outlined both of those very, very clearly. I do think the first issue that you have raised, though, is one that we're hearing a lot of folks just saying, okay, I was fortunate enough to be one of those 4,800 original loans through PPP, but it doesn't really cover my true payroll as a seasonal business. So the opportunity for modification is important. It is significant. I would suggest, though, that if you are in this situation, that you move quickly to go back to your lender to do this, because as we saw with the first allocation of funding, that we moved through that in less than 2 weeks. We know the need is still very, very intense, and I think we're going to be in a situation where that fund is going to be tapped out pretty quickly here. So I would advise all of these seasonal businesses that were able to get the first crack. This is the chance to get that modification.
And Dwayne, sorry, one more thing just to add. Again, you can work with our offices and the SBA office in Anchorage, which has been helpful in walking banks and the people through this modification. And then just back to your one question, you can, if you got an EIDL loan, and again, there are not many out there, but hopefully they're going to be more out there for our small businesses, you can refinance that into a PPP if you get it later. So that's the other interplay between PPP and EIDL.
All right, thanks, Senators. Next up, we're going to go to Jeremy Osbourne in Anchorage.
Hello, Senators. I represent a 501c4 nonprofit organization that works, we're considered essential. We work with bulk fuel facilities in rural Alaska. So as a 501c4 nonprofit, we do not qualify for the Payroll Protection Program, and it doesn't seem like we qualify for the nonprofit rate on the EIDL. And so I was wondering if there are any plans to expand sort of the classification of nonprofits in both of those programs, because there's a lot of us who might not be classified as a 501c3 but are still small businesses doing a lot of essential work in Alaska.
So you said you were a 501c4?
Yes, ma'am.
So what I'm looking at now is you're correct. 501c3, 501c19 are eligible for the PPP, but I am told that 501c4s and C6s, trade and professional associations, are eligible for the EIDL. So
at the nonprofit rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's what I'm looking at here. Additionally, any nonprofits that don't receive or aren't eligible for PPP would be eligible for the employee retention payroll tax credits, as well as let's see. I guess so. You've got the employee retention payroll tax credits under Section 2301 of the CARES Act, but you are eligible as a nonprofit under the EIDL as a C4.
Okay. And do you think there's any plans to expand the payroll protection program to the other sorts of nonprofits?
You know, I don't know that we have had many discussions about expansion to other nonprofits. I do know that making or allowing nonprofits to be able to access these SBA loans was a significant step, because, as you know, they were not eligible previously to the CARES Act. So this may be something that we need to do a little bit more poking around here to see how many other C4s are looking at this and saying, why are we limited from being able to access it? It is something that we can look into, though. We can do that for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Jeremy, I would just add to what Lisa said is, one of the things that I think is going to be helpful, we're going back in session, and one of the things that I've been encouraging my colleagues, after the CARES Act was passed, the Senate, the House went on a recess. I didn't think that was a good idea, just because there's so many folks that we knew were probably, although we're trying to cover everybody, that weren't going to be covered, not on purpose, but mistakes, or this pandemic is unfolding in so many different ways so quickly. So we can definitely take a look at that. No promises that we'll get it done, but I just think it's a lot more likely that we're going to be back there in the Senate working on these issues daily. It's more likely that these are the kind of things that we can try to address.
All right, thank you. Next up, we're going to go to Kerrigan, who's got a question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And hello, both the senators, and thank you for taking my call. I've been on the call a couple of times, so I know how popular you guys are. I'm concerned about the post office and what's going on with the post office, and I'm fearful that the mentality is going to be like, oh, we can, save the post office by privatizing it. Oh, we can, do all these things. We can do better than the post office. But Alaskans rely so incredibly much on the post office. I think everybody knows the story about the guy who, shipped bricks one by one wrapped in construction paper out into the bush to try and build a house. And you always see tires and boxes of Pilot or red bread, and medicines get shipped out. And I just think it's an incredibly vital link. And I think that without the ferry system being the backbone of the state that it has been, and the ability to get to some of these remote rural areas, and plus this thing that's happening with oil, which is another concern of mine, and I'll probably get on next week if I can and talk about that. But I'm really incredibly concerned about the post office and what your positions are to protect it. I'm not asking about what you think about it. I want to know what you're going to do to protect it. So I'll sit here and listen, and thank you very much for the opportunity to pose my question.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, I don't know if it's just in Alaska that perhaps we recognize and value what our Postal Service provides for us. You know, in many communities, if you didn't have the Postal Service, you wouldn't have your medications. You wouldn't have the ability to really be out in so many of our communities that are off the road system. So we know how heavily we rely on it and how much we need a reliable postal service. So your ask about what are we doing? I have been very worried about just the ongoing stability. Part of the biggest challenge that the post office faces, in my view, the biggest challenge is the fact that they are required to pre-fund retiree benefits. And this is a requirement that is really, it's responsible for the vast majority of Postal Service's financial deficit. And so you look at that and you say, well, wow, it's in the red all the time. It must be just poorly mismanaged. It must be just eating up all the taxpayer dollars. We have to privatize it. We have to do something. No, what we need to do is address this pre-funding requirement. So I'm a co-sponsor of what we call the U.S. Postal Service Fairness Act, which basically relieves the Postal Service from this requirement to do the pre-funding, not funding of retirement benefits, but pre-funding. So the other thing that I think it's important to know, the Postal Service takes a lot of hits from people that I don't think understands how it is structured. Almost none of the support for the Postal Service comes from the United States taxpayer. Almost entirely, the supports for the Postal Service comes from postal products. That's where they get their revenue. They get no federal appropriations except for some small amounts for mailing books to the blind and mailing ballots to Americans that are living overseas. Otherwise, there's no federal support. So they've been making it work, but the thing that drags them under every time is this requirement to do a pre-funding of their retirement benefits. So in the CARES Act, we did provide $10 billion in borrowing authority. That was important. What we're hearing now are some who suggest that they want to have some perhaps more substantive strings attached to any borrowing authority. That's something that we're looking at because right now the Postal Service, as other businesses around the country, they're being impacted by the COVID hit, and so I'm watching the post office very carefully. I know we need to do something about this pre-funding requirement because if we don't, it's pretty tough to put it on just solid foundation financially.
So, Carol, I don't think I have to add much to that, but I think you get a sense from Senator Murkowski that your entire congressional delegation are stalwart supporters of the post office, and we understand, and I think it makes it so vital to our communities. It's a lifeline for so many of our community, but the universal service obligation, that's the mission there, means universal, and so it does play a role in our state that's unique in many ways relative to Alaska, which is why we're stalwart supporters. Just like bypass mail, and other programs that that really matter to us, that other states might be like, oh, wait, why can't you just drive there? Well, you guys all know why we can't just drive there, because so many of our communities don't even have roads. So we are defenders of all of these programs, because you can't be treated differently just because you're an American and you live in a village without a road, especially on some of these universal service obligation mandates in federal law for all American citizens. So that's the way we view it, and we'll keep focused on that.
All right, thank you, Senators. Next up, we're going to go to Colleen Stevens in Valdez, who has a question for the Senators.
Hello, Senator Sullivan and Murkowski. Thank you very much for creating these opportunities for us to have a voice and for representing us in D.C. My question is relative to the revisions of the PPP, which is phenomenal for those of us that are seasonal operators. So thank you for hearing us after the original version came out. If we were to apply and receive the increased funds, it's more of a clarification. Do we still have the 8-week window for the spend, or has that also been increased?
So, Colleen, I'll answer that, and thank you for your leadership on, hearing from you and others. We were very highly motivated to recognize that, one of the ways that we could try to soften the blow for our seasonal businesses is to make this change, and so we did do that. Now, we were looking at trying to change it legislatively, as you may have heard, and did kind of take a crack at that 8-week forgiveness period, but unfortunately, that was not in the cards with regard to the regulation. So for the 8-week forgivable loan period is still only for the 8-week period after the origination of the loan. And I know that's not ideal. I know that was another concern that a number of our small businesses that were seasonal had, but you now under the reg have the ability to choose a 12-week period of your employee base from May 1 through September 15th. That's to, again, get the size of the loan bigger, since the PPP is a function of your payroll, from last summer. But that 8-week period where the loan is forgivable if you use it principally for the paying of your employees is still the 8-week period after the origination loan. That was something we tried to also fix, and in statute it would have worked, but on the reg side, that was something that we were unable to get done.
I appreciate that clarification, and I think that'll help lots of us as we observe what to do. So thank you very much.
Okay, next up, we're going to go to Han Cho in Anchorage, who has a question for the Senators.
Senator, thank you very much for receiving my call. Throughout the other questions, you answered my questions. My concern was two. One is the PPP loans. I'm a CPA, and I help many small clients apply for their loan, but it is a function of the banks who accumulate all the information and submit it to the SBA. And somehow, some banks we are dealing with did not submit those early for the first round, and even for second round, some of my clients haven't heard from the bank or SBA, and they said until they emphasize that funding might not be available, but we have submitted those loans earlier, but there is a chance that they might not be able to get the money on this round. Is there a possibility that the additional funding might be secured through the legislation? And second question was the the 8-week period, and because the business is still slow, they couldn't find the workers to fill that position. So they might not be able to spend that money on the payroll so that they get forgiveness. But is there any possibility in the future that may be extended? Thanks very much.
Well, I do think in answer to your question about whether or not there might be a subsequent round of funding, all I can do is just take a guess at this point in time, given, again, the intensity of the demand that we have seen, not only in Alaska, but around the country. I think it is clear that that small businesses are really starved right now. They're desperate for the support, and the longer we see a continuation of our local economies just kind of on pause, or even slow openings like we're doing in Alaska, I think we recognize that time is not making this get any better. It is not helping any of these small businesses. And so I think this is exactly what we as lawmakers need to be doing, is to be making sure that the programs that we've put in place are responsive to the need, and when the need is clearly demonstrated, that we be responsive with the resources. Now, we've all heard the stories, we've read about them, we've seen them on the evening news about, the Lakers getting millions of dollars and big franchise restaurants getting millions of dollars. But the Treasury is weighing in very, very clearly on this, and has issued guidance as recently as yesterday, just basically making sure that we have some limitations there on not necessarily who can apply for the fund, but if you don't have other sources of liquidity, and then you should not be like the Lakers and apply for this. These are resources that were intended truly for these smaller businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic, and for whom their options are more limited. And so there's a close eye that is being given to this, but you will continue to hear of those who have taken advantage of a program that was well intended, and they are not the ones for whom it was intended.
So, Hannah, I would just add to what Senator Murkowski said. We have been hearing, and we've been working very closely with our banks and credit unions, that they've been clearing the backlogs of pending applications, and many are now taking new applications. I think all the credit unions have cleared, and I think most of the banks have. And more specifically to your question, if someone takes the loan and is looking at that 8-week period for the loan forgiveness, if they can't hire enough people, they can always repay the loan penalty free, or roll it over into a low interest loan after the 8-week period. And remember that low interest loan is 1%, no interest or principal for 6 months, and federally guaranteed. So there's still options that you can have if the PPP recipient small business can't bring the workers back and pay them during that 8-week period, and then they miss that window. to have the loan turn into a grant, at least for that 8-week period, which is, of course, one of the real attractions of the PPP program.
Okay, thanks, Senators. We're going to sneak in one last question here before we have to wrap up. So we're going to go to Elizabeth Odom on the Kenai, who's got a question for the Senators.
Hello. I've gotten my question answered already, but now that I'm on, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Senators, thank you. Workers, everybody's doing a great job, and everybody be safe out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you,
That's
Elizabeth.
a way to wrap it.